So this is part 29 in our series of wild harvest edibles. Thou preparest a table before me. And our reminder is that whenever you're looking at any health challenge or a way of addressing that, you incorporate and include a medical practitioner that shares a philosophy of care of the human body and disease that you do. So they share a similar philosophy. That way you're not butting heads with the direction that you're trying to go. And the tools that we share tonight are educational in nature and can be added to your wellness toolbox as well as your everyday culinary routine if you choose, depending on what we're talking about. And as always, be sure to check everything out and do your due diligence and not just blindly accept anything that comes along, even from here. So just make sure you do your own research in addition to what you hear as you check things out. So the doctor of the future, Thomas Edison said, will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease. Tonight's plant focus is a tree. It's the black walnut, Juglans nigra. It's more typically found in the eastern part of the United States, but there are walnuts here as well. And most walnut species will have a similar effect. Most of the research has been done on black walnut, but they have a similar covering as the black walnut does. It can grow to be 100 feet tall, typically has a branching crown, as you can see in the picture here on the right. Has pale hair-covered buds as the leaves are just coming out. And you can see on the bottom right that it's pinnately compound leaves. That if you look closely, they're actually alternate, which means that they're slightly staggered. If they're opposite, they would be directly, the petioles, that is the leaf stems, would be directly opposite of each other. So it's a pinnately compound leaf, but slightly offset, making it an alternate pattern of orientation on the main stem. They're hairy underneath and smooth on top. So those are some key features for identifying the black walnut. In the botanical world, they are what we call monoecious, which means one house. So dioecious is the other category, which means two houses. So an example of dioecious would be ginkgo biloba, because you have the male plant and the female plant. They're two separate trees. Whereas something that's monoecious has both the male and female flowers and parts on the same tree. And in some of those, you actually have them in the same flower, which is the way most flowering plants are. But in some, like the black walnut, they actually are two separate entities on the same tree. So you can see in the lower left that they have catkins, so the flexible, dangly portions there. On the lower left there are the catkins of the walnut, and then they have the flowering blossoms that will then become the walnut, that you can see the various stages of the fruit that are ripening and getting older and then dehusked there in the three stages on the picture there on the lower right. So the fruit ripens in the fall, has a brownish green pulpy husk that covers the nut. And when you harvest them, you should harvest them from the ground as they fall. So as soon as they have fallen, that means they're ripe and ready, and just go ahead and collect them there from the ground. That way you don't have to climb up in a tree and risk breaking a neck getting them out. Although it probably is important to go through on a routine basis and collect them rather than waiting too long, because there are animals that do like black walnuts, namely squirrels. I checked a local walnut tree here the other morning when I was out running and was disappointed to not find walnuts under the tree. However, I do know that we do have squirrels in the area, and I believe I've seen walnuts on this tree. So I was a little disappointed and surprised not to feel them underfoot or in the grass around this tree. The fruit, again, ripens in the fall, and the nuts are odorless themselves, but the husk and leaves have a fairly spicy smell associated with them, a pretty pungent kind of odor to them. The edibility, of course, the seed or the nut is eaten raw or cooked, so you can use it in cooking or just break it out, crack it out and eat it. Has a sweet, rich flavor. We know that they're rich in omega-3 fatty acids and other healthful nutrients that help to bolster brain health, among other things, and heart health. You can see that they do take some doing to get out of their shells. As you can imagine, the husk is actually a very beneficial part of the walnut, the black walnut, as is the walnut itself, which takes some doing to get out, either a nut picker or a hammer to crack them out. One thing that I was unaware of that seems like an interesting thing to investigate is this black walnut syrup. So tapping it much like you would a maple tree and boiling it down and making a syrup out of the sap in the spring from the black walnut. The hulls also are well known for their use as a dye, either for fabric or yarn, even for skin and hair. So the black walnut can be used as a brown coloring agent. The more you would use, the more dense the coloration would be. You can see the individual here husking the black walnuts has very dyed skin on them. I remember reading, I believe it was Swift Arrow or something like that, a story about Native Americans where they had captured some Caucasian individuals, and they tried to make them look like Native Americans by dyeing their skin with a walnut husk concoction. So it can do skin tanning, maybe, or dyeing anyway, to get it into a darker tone. So some nutritional qualities of walnuts. Lots of different things are present in walnuts. A wide range of the B vitamins are present. A good number of minerals, copper, manganese, and magnesium, phosphorus and zinc, iron and potassium, fairly decent amount of potassium, selenium. So we usually think of selenium as being found in macadamia nuts or Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts in particular, not macadamia, Brazil nuts. And that's important for overall health, as having those micronutrients of selenium, but you can also get them from walnut. Calcium is also an important nutrient. This is from USDA. And another range of fats, carbohydrates, protein, 9% of the daily value. And notice that this is of daily value. Another way of saying that is the RDI or RDA, recommended daily intake or recommended daily allowance. And those are bare minimums. Essentially, the daily values are bare minimums to keep one out of a deficiency disease. So here's a picture of the omega-3 fatty acids. They're good for brain health. And we see that walnuts have the best source of nut omega-3 alpha-linolenic acid. Pecans are next in the list that is shown here. Pistachios and peanuts and almonds don't have anything, but walnuts are fairly high in that regard. We can see just where it gets its name from the omega-6 and omega-3. If you start on the right of your screen and count the kinks in the chain here. So we have the end with the two oxygens. You see the little alpha sign. That's the alpha end of the molecule. The omega is the end. So think about scripture, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, creation and the second coming. We have the alpha end of the molecule and the omega end, and they're counting back from the omega end. And the omega-6s, we have a double bond, 6 kinks back. So starting at the very end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the 6th carbon in the chain, and that's where the double bond is first encountered. And so that's an omega-6 fatty acid. The omega-3s are 3 bonds before you get to the kink created by the double bond. So counting from the end, 1 carbon, 2, 3. So you don't see the carbons labeled there. They're just in the junctions of the kinks, the zigzag, and that zigzag is by virtue of the bond structure of these chemical formulas, and the kinking actually separates them and makes them straighter in their chain formation. So the kinking and the saturation of hydrogen is hydrogenation is what takes place when they artificially add hydrogens, which creates a liquid at room temperature, whereas a unsaturated or unhydrogenated oil is going to be liquid at room temperature versus solid. So looking at the omega-3 found in acids in walnuts, we see that walnuts are pretty high, but flax is actually even higher, and chia is higher as well. So those are seeds versus a nut seed from a walnut. So they're a good source, but our flax and chia are actually better than walnuts as far as fatty acid omega-3 goes, just as a comparison. So some medicinal uses and properties of walnuts. Looks like 3 tennis balls here, but it's just the walnuts and their green husks. They have anti-inflammatory properties, antiviral properties, anti-emetic, or at least emetic properties, analgesic or pain-killing qualities, antifungal properties, astringent, that's basically tissue constriction qualities. So it's good for wounds and things like that. It has laxative and vermifuge anti-parasitic qualities. So the part used is the green hulls, which has a much higher potency than the dry hulls. So you can use dry hulls as well, but the green hulls have a higher potency of their effective actions. So from a parasitic standpoint, the black walnut hull and garlic cloves mixed together with Oregon grape and wormwood, all those mixed together are very effective anti-parasitic, kills the eggs, the larvae, the adult worms, as well as other types of parasites. It's interesting that there are other different anti-parasitic agents out there, some that are being used right now in various applications that weren't really thought of prior, particularly in the world of antivirals. At least they're having an effect on virus clearance and longevity within the animal model and the human system. And it could have a dovetailed approach into the fact that it actually is reducing parasite load, in that it is an anti-parasitic, but it does function in an antiviral way as well. So walnut extract as an anti-parasitic and noted antiviral qualities, there may be some tandem application there that those dots haven't been connected yet. So skin issues, prevention and mitigation of things like blemishes, so skin blemishes like eruptions of rashes and things like that, warts, eczema. So eczema and psoriasis can be benefited by it, but usually eczema and psoriasis are, in fact, most skin conditions are actually external manifestations of internal issues, particularly with the GI. If you have acne or psoriasis, eczema, other types of things, it's either excess fats or internal GI disturbances or toxins that have been taken in and are allowed in through the gut in a way that they aren't normally conveyed, and then that ends up manifesting itself on the skin. When those things are discovered and mitigated, then typically the skin inflammation decreases significantly and may even go away. So a poultice of black walnut husk in water is a good way to address those skin issues from a surface standpoint. You can even use the hull that's been dried and powdered, use a carrier oil like olive oil, or even something like coconut oil could be beneficial, or even mixing that with beeswax too could be helpful in allowing it to stick to the skin in a way so that they would be able to deliver the properties of the walnut hull into the skin. So antifungal properties, there's some compounds that are present. A key one that we'll see popping up again here is juglone. And juglone is actually part of its scientific name. And actually the genus name has that same similar form of name associated with it. But juglone is a primary compound that has antifungal properties, and also the tannins that are present in the black walnut. So some of the things that it can do, used both internally and externally, is its effect against candida, which is a yeast infection which can have devastating effects when it gets rampant and out of control. So this can check it and and put a halt on its forward progression. Other uses on an external basis: athlete's foot, jock itch, ringworm. Again, ringworm is within the antifungal, anti-parasitic component, and it can help keep that from spreading and turn it off and kill it. So one way to do that is to use the black walnut hull juice. You can use that externally. So I would take some kind of a squeezing action to squeeze that juice out of the hull and have it available. You could actually also do an extraction of the other properties from the hull. So a poultice or salve can be made from the powdered or fresh hulls. So the down below on the right looks like dirt, but it's actually powdered walnut hulls, black walnut hulls that can be saved, because you can't always have fresh black walnut available just because it is seasonal. So during the rest of the year, you would maintain it in a powdered form that you would have been harvested when it was ripe in the fall. So in things like jock itch and other things like that, you can place the powdered hulls in the skin folds. Typically, it happens in people who have more adipose and more folding skin on their bodies, that creates an environment where funguses can set up camp, yeast can set up camp. But just letting it slide in and put that into those folds can help to break down those fungal and yeast infections in those places, as well as heat rashes. Digestive health. So the benefits for upset stomachs and gut or in colon inflammation, helps to normalize digestion. The powdered black walnut hull can be used for constipation and diarrhea, also as a laxative. It has a very anti-inflammatory role. Also, the omega-3s that are found there are beneficial for heart function, just to help aid in contributing to a healthy heart. And from an antiviral perspective, it has a very long history, actually, as use as an antiviral, both in preventative roles and in treatment roles. Juglone is the molecule here that's indicated on the right, which again is that chemical compound along with the tannins that has the primary active role, medicinal active role in the hulls of the black walnut. It inhibits viral reproduction, including herpes. A journal called Phytotherapy Research looked at juglone from black walnut, and it was shown to have inhibitory effects on the replication of HIV, which is the primary agent involved in the AIDS syndrome. So black walnut tincture can be very helpful in that regard, useful for that. So different parts of the black walnut contain juglone. The roots and the buds also contain it, in addition to the hull. Juglone is not water soluble, so it needs a non-water soluble agent to extract it most efficiently. So the best extractions are alcohol extractions, high proof alcohol extractions, but you can also try a glycerin extraction, and that would probably have some components that could be beneficial. Using it topically, most of these uses are topical. An alcohol extraction wouldn't be a problem not using it internally, for just using it externally. So the European Journal of Medical Chemistry published an article in this year, or last year, so that's 2021, August 21 of August 2021, August 18. So the December 5, it must be 2020. So discovery of juglone and its derivatives as potent against SARS-CoV-2, the main protease inhibitors. So that was looking at the current epidemic that seems to be going around. This is a photomicrograph of that agent here down below, and also found that there's lots of different medicinal plants, including black walnut, that have antiviral components and activity that have been found to be effective actually in inhibiting all different types of viruses, including the current one that has additional function that's been added to it from a man-derived source. So that's good news, that there are things in nature that we don't have to rely on men's preparations of things to rectify and heal the problems that are created by man. So harvest recommendations: to harvest them, be sure you're wearing gloves. You saw in one of the first pictures a man with some very dark skin on their hands from the hulls. So wearing gloves is a good idea. Remove the hull from the nut. You can eat the nut. You can eat them throughout the year, of course. Save the hulls. If you can use some of them green, do some extractions from them right away, that's great. If not, dry them. You could use a plant dehydrator or something like that, and then powder them, and you could extract them into a tincture form. So they store well in a dry powdered form, as well as in a liquid tincture extract. So storing the black walnuts in the shell, be sure you allow them to dry in the shell following harvest. Make sure you store them in a squirrel-proof cage. In a storage of a squirrel-proof container of some nature, because they do like them. So make sure that they're not accessible at all. A hammer and a pick, a little digger pick to dig out the meats from the walnuts is very helpful. Remember cracking walnuts around the table at Christmas time when I was a kid with a nutcracker and picking out the good food from in those nuts. A lot of work to get them out. It's easier today because you can just go buy them already hulled, and that's half the fun. So black walnut leaves can be used and picked throughout the season. So all through the season, they can be useful. So some cautions. Some people may be allergic to them. We know that some people are allergic to nuts, and so they should just be cautious of those things of using it. Maybe you should just bypass this particular food if they have those allergies. So that's important to remember. Best avoid if pregnant or nursing, although it's been stated that the risk is very low in this particular plant, in this tree. So here's a recipe for the black walnut hull tincture. So you take the ground black walnut hulls. You can use 80 proof or other high proof alcohol, or you could use vegetable glycerin. You're going to have a stronger extract with alcohol, and using it externally, it would not be deleterious. You wouldn't want to use it internally, in my opinion, but the vegetable glycerin would be an alternative to go if you did want to use it in an internal way. So place the ground hulls into a jar that has a tight fitting lid, and fill it up to a third full. So you can see on the right here, you see the black walnut hulls. These are green black walnut hulls. The ground black walnut hulls are from a dried source. This would be a fresh source. You can do it either way. Do the tincture. So two different ways of doing it with the same thing, just fresh versus dried. So then add your alcohol or glycerin to a 1/2 inch of the top. Cover it tightly and keep it in a cool, dark place, and shake the jar for a few days. So number 6, if you're using alcohol, it does have a tendency to evaporate. So you want to check it out every so often and bring the level back up to its 1/2 inch to the top. So soak it for 6 to 8 weeks, doing that stirring, shaking every few days. Once you've gotten to 6 or 8 weeks of time, then strain it through some fine cheesecloth and squeeze out as much as you can. And then go ahead and toss those hulls out. Then place that extract in a cool place overnight and strain it again through a coffee filter. So you're going to be straining out some additional solids, and then just toss those residues away, the hull residues, and use the decanted liquid volume at the top. Then label cap and store in a dark bottle and keep it in a cool, dark place. So black walnut tincture can be a good delivery form for the jugulones that are in black walnut.